So thank you everyone for joining us today for our webinar today. We're going to be talking about understanding peer-reviewed research, and we'll kind of break up the session today into three parts. We'll start with Gabrielle Ryder from our Pepperdine Libraries team, who will talk about best practices for going about and using the Pepperdine Libraries databases to search for sources with a little bit of practice embedded there. So if you have a laptop or access to something, a device to be able to maybe practice the search, that would be great, the search process. Then we'll shift it over to Kate. Kate will talk to us about breaking down an article. She used an article with an example and best for comprehension, and we'll transition to application. So we'll look at some examples of how we might be able to integrate some of the ideas from these sources into the paper. So my name is Carlos Jimenez. I'm the Assistant Director of Writing Support here, and I'll pass it over to some of our other team members who will introduce themselves as well. So Suha, go ahead and take it away.
Yes, hi everyone, welcome. I'm so glad everyone's here. My name is Soha Wezni, and I am the writing support specialist, mainly working for the doctoral programs, but I provide writing support for all of our graduate students as well. For today, I won't be speaking really. I'm just going to be here to moderate the chat, relate any questions that you may have that might not be addressed. And just really be here as support for any technical issues. So please reach out to me if there are any technical issues that you are experiencing, and we can figure that out. And it's nice to meet all of you. I'll pass it to Kate.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Kate Sachs. I'm another writing support specialist. I work mainly with online psychology students. So I recognize some of you. It's great to have you here. And I will pass it on to Gabrielle.
Thank you, Kate. Hi, everyone. My name is Gabrielle Ryder, and I am the librarian at Pepperdine's West LA campus, and I'm also the subject specialist for all students in the GSEP programs. So you can come to me with any research or library-related questions. And with that, let's get started. So we're first going to start off with an introduction to the library website and how to do research with library resources. Now, this is going to be a fairly quick introduction, so feel free to ask questions, and you can always email me with any research questions after the webinar as well. But let's get started and let's pop on over to the library website. If you haven't been to the library website before, I'll put it in the chat for you. It's library.pepperdine.edu. And this is where you will want to start your research. Whether you're looking for articles, books, any type of source, you will want to start on the library resources on the library website, specifically when you are looking for peer-reviewed articles as well. Oftentimes, if you're just using Google or Google Scholar or just searching the web, you'll run into paywalls or it'll say that you don't have access. But if you use the authenticated library links, you will get access to our databases and all of those peer-reviewed journal articles. So always start your research here. We're going to really dive into our databases and e-journals, but before we get into that, there's so many resources for you here on the library website, but the main one that I will talk about is also Ask a Librarian service. This is where, I'll put this in the chat too, this is where you can get in touch and get questions answered. So we do have a chat service that is usually manned by like a real live human. So there is a person talking to you behind this chat, or you can send us an email, and my contact information is here at the bottom of this page. There's my email right there. So that's how you can get your questions answered. But we are going to dive into this databases and e-journals link right here. This is where all of those peer-reviewed articles live. And depending on what program you're in and what you're interested in, there's so many different options here on this page. If you're in any of our education programs, if you're in the EDD, if you're getting your master's of arts and teaching, your PhD, you might start under our education subject heading. If you're in any of our psych programs, you might want to start in our psychology subject heading. So keep these two in mind. I'm going to just click on psychology, and this will give you a very comprehensive list of many databases that are best for doing research in psychology. One of these databases is the most common for psychology students, and that is PsycInfo. If you haven't heard of PsycInfo yet, again, it's great for both education and psychology topics because there's a lot of overlap in these two subjects. So PsycInfo is probably most popular for psych students. Now, if you're in any of our education programs or if you're interested in education topics, you can click on our education subject heading right here. And the most popular one for education students starting out their research is ERIC right here. So this is ERIC. It's going to look very similar to PsycInfo. But these are the two databases that we're going to be talking about and using today. I am going to start in PsycInfo, but before we get into that, let's go back to our PowerPoint and let's talk about creating your research question and then how to search for your research question in the databases. So your research question, ideally, it's something you're interested in. There's research out there on that topic, and you'll want to take the core concepts of your research question and turn them into keywords. When you're searching in the library databases, the databases don't search for information in the same way as Google, where you can use your natural language to search. They don't really understand full sentences like this. You will have to use keywords to search in the databases. So you take your core concepts of your research question. In this case, if, for example, our research question is, how does mindfulness training affect stress regulation in graduate students? We'll take those core concepts. Those would be mindfulness, stress regulation, and our population graduate students. And then you can think of keywords and synonyms that reflect those main concepts. So for mindfulness, you might think of mindfulness-based interventions, certain types of mindfulness practices like breath work or maybe meditation. Then for stress regulation, you might think of different keywords like academic stress or stress management. And then for grad students, you could also say doctoral students, master students, university students. Now, for these keywords, you might notice how I'm using some quotation marks and I use an asterisk for some of our keywords. So these do play a part in the search and how the database searches. So the quotation marks, they act like a sort of glue in the database for phrases. Phrases are two or more words, and it keeps the phrase together. So let's say if we were to search mindfulness-based intervention without quotation marks, it would search for those words, but they might be separated in the article. They wouldn't be together. Now, if you use quotes, you'll be searching for that exact phrase. So it narrows the search and it gives you less results, but the results are more specific to what you're looking for when you use quotes around those phrases. Now we also have asterisks. That searches all possible endings of that word. So in this case, stress, if you use it after stress, you would be searching stressor, stressors, stressed. Maybe if you were to use it after educate, you would search educator, education, educating, so on and so forth. So the asterisk really broadens your search again, saves you some time, so you don't have to type in all possible endings of the word you are looking for. So these are our keywords, and now I'm going to go into a demonstration in the database. Let's go. So here we are in our PsycInfo. And I'm going to start typing in some keywords. You can see here, PsycInfo is really helpful in that it gives you synonyms and suggestions to broaden your search. And so I might try this one right here. It gives me a lot of great synonyms, and I can add, maybe I want to add also meditation or breath work, like in our example. And you'll notice how I'm connecting all of these synonyms with or. Or is one of our Boolean operators. Now, that is some library jargon for you, but these ors and these ands actually play a really big part in how the database understands your search. So we have our ors to connect our synonyms, and what those tell the database is any or either or of these keywords. So any of these synonyms are okay to be in my results. So again, this is a broadening operator. It will give you more results. So the more synonyms you use, the more results you'll get. And then we use and to connect our different concepts. So you use and when you want results that contain both of these terms. So we'll go to our next term, which is stress regulation, and we'll put in stress regulation, or maybe stress management, or we can do stress with an asterisk. Maybe we'll also add anxiety in there. And then we'll do our population, which is graduate students. Here we go. And so now, as you can see, we are using our ors and our ands. Our articles will have one keyword or multiple keywords from here. So mindfulness or any of our synonyms, stress regulation or any of these synonyms, and graduate students. So we're connecting our concepts with and right here. The other great thing about PsycInfo is that it has a lot of filters. So you'll usually always want to use the peer-reviewed filter here. And why is that? What is peer review and why is it so important? Why do professors always really emphasize peer review? So peer review is a process where a scholarly work, like a journal article, is evaluated by other experts in the field, so other peers in the field, to check its validity and quality. So peer reviewed is basically the gold standard. Because it is supposed to be rigorously checked by other experts in the field. So peer-reviewed articles have an extra measure of credibility and reliability. So that's why these peer-reviewed articles are some of the best sources to cite in your own work. So we always want to use that filter right there. You also have a publication date. Typically, professors would like you to cite things within the past 10 years. And then PsycInfo has a lot of other great filters, such as age group. Depending on what you're interested in, you can filter your results to specific age groups. We also have population groups. And finally, methodology. This one is a very popular one as well. Let's say you're only interested in quantitative studies. You can filter to that right there. All right, I'll pause and check if there's any questions so far. Let me know. But with that, we can now do our search. And we get 64 results here with our filters on. And now you can look at your results. And if we click into an articles page, first things first, you can read the title, and the abstract is available here. If you want to access the full text, you'll have to click on Access Options and then PDF, and it will bring you to the full text of the article here. Sometimes it'll bring you to another website. It just depends. But that's how you can access the full text of the article. You can also cite from this page in APA 7th and copy that to your clipboard, so you have that available to you. Oh, yes, we have a question from Clement.
I don't want to interrupt if you have not finished, Gabriella, but I had an example of an article that I wanted to try on your system. Incidentally, it's one I worked with Kate. I was just trying to do it as you speak and it didn't come up. So can you tell me what I'm doing wrong to find that article?
Yes.
Yeah.
What article? This is a good example of actually, if you have a specific article that you're looking for, we can look for that on the library website. So yeah, what's the title of the article?
So it's in the Journal of Humanistic Counseling. And oh, you're not going on PsycInfo, you're just typing it there. Okay, got you. That's why
So
I was trying to do a search on PsycInfo in inputting keywords. But I suppose if you type the whole title, maybe yeah, it will come up. Okay, I'm sorry.
yeah, if you have no,
Yeah.
this is a good example. If you
Yeah.
have a specific article in mind,
Mhm.
it's often better to just
Got
search
you.
it in
I'm gonna
quotes
add.
in this
Yeah.
library search bar.
Yeah.
That will bring you
Yeah.
directly to it
Yeah.
because the specific articles, it might not be in PsycInfo. It might be in a
Yeah.
different
I got
database.
you. PsycInfo is more if you've got a subject in mind. I've got you. All right.
Exactly.
Okay.
PsycInfo is great for, more broad searching when you're looking for articles. If you have something in mind, search it here in the search bar in quotes to keep that phrase together.
And just, yeah. Sorry, just so I don't keep interrupting, my other question was, I've been trying for years since I've been at Pepperdine. I just do not know how, if you offer the facility to borrow online books, just so I don't have to go to the library or have them sent to me or everything. I just don't know how to do it. I've tried many times with your predecessor, Gabrielle, and I just never managed.
Yeah, so are you looking for ebooks?
Let's say I'm looking for an ebook from Lacan, the French psychologist. Can I borrow an ebook from the library?
Yes, so all of our ebooks, I'll just type in a keyword. So you would type in whatever book you're looking for or the author you're looking for. So you'll type in that here,
Mhm.
and then you can filter on this side to ebooks right here.
Can I give you the example of the book I'm looking for?
Yeah, tell me the
It's called
title.
Lacan, Lacen,
Lacon?
Tan, sorry,
An, sorry, okay, got it.
On Love by someone called, sorry, do you need the title of the author?
No, that's
Yeah.
okay. Let's
Sorry, I
see.
forgot the name of the author. Fink, Fink is his.
So it
Fink, that's
looks
him.
like
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
this is the one you're looking for.
that's correct.
So you can request this item and it will be sent to you physically. If you want the ebook,
Mhm.
Clement, I'm going to recommend you email me
Yeah,
one-on-one
yeah,
and I
yeah.
can help you
Okay,
with
thank you.
that. I'll put my email in the chat
Yeah,
for any questions.
all right.
But yeah, follow up with me and I'll try to follow
Yeah,
up with
thank you
you
so
to
much.
get
Thank
you
you.
this.
Mhm.
Yeah. Diana, did you have a question?
Quick question. I had found an article and I didn't do it through Pepperdine initially. I think it was through a different university. And I wanted to ask what the reliability of the site is because the other university didn't include page numbers, but it included a website like address. And the one in Pepperdine did include the page numbers. So I was kind of confused as to how accurate is it when you click on cite this for me?
Oh, right here on the database.
Yes.
This one? Yeah, great question. So this citation generator, it's definitely a good start. It looks like this one included the pages, but it's not always perfect. So I always recommend, and the Writing Center also recommends, use this as a jumping off point, but make sure you're double checking and making sure all the information is correct, that it's entered in there. Um, and yeah, so good for jumping off, but always double check, I would say. Does that answer
So
your
is it
question?
why I think it was it was the same article, but the University of Carolina, 'cause that's just how I started by accident. Um, it didn't include the page numbers. Is it always? And then Pepperdine did. So is
So
one correct and one isn't, or is
were
it?
you using PsycInfo? on through
You know
both?
what? I think I started as a Google search and it was just an article I wanted, and then I cross-referenced it with Eric, and the citations were slightly different.
So if you're getting the citation from like the University of
Uh-huh. Carolina, I don't know.
Carolina, and if you're getting their citation from like their library citation generator, like how we have it here,
It might not be accurate.
it could be different or not accurate. I'm not
Okay.
really sure how they do it at the other
Okay.
university. But again, you know,
Always
I'm not really
double
sure why, but yeah, just rule of thumb, always double check.
check. All right, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Let's see. Just looking at the chat. Yeah, Zotero is a great reference to also help with citations. Um, okay, any other questions about searching? I think we are going to move to the activity so you all can try this yourself. Hopefully, that all made sense. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to go over, but let's take, let's say, the next 5 minutes and 5 to 10 minutes, and we're going to try this activity just so you can practice searching on your own. So in this activity, you'll choose a question below and practice searching for an article in either ERIC or PsycInfo. And then I'll send the link to a Padlet in the chat where you can post the results that you got, post the keywords you used so that your fellow colleagues can see different methods of searching for the same questions, because your keywords can really make a big impact on the results you get. So if maybe one colleague uses different keywords and gets 100, maybe you use some different ones and you get 50. It's really interesting to see how it changes like that. All right, so I am going to put the link to the Padlet right now in the chat. Okay. And if you have any questions about searching or if anything comes up, feel free to raise your hand, put the question in the chat, whatever you need. And again, here is our databases page.
Yeah, and while you are doing that, just a quick note on the citation generators. Yeah, it looked like that example was accurate, but you just always want to double check. You know, I would recommend the APA manual, you know, as kind of that final check, which some of the citation generators do work, others don't. And someone did mention in the chat again about maybe that location of that article might be in different places. So that's also something that you have to look out for, that you might have found it in one journal, but then it also might be on another platform. So those citations, you know, those references might vary depending on the actual source. I think they wanted to show the questions again.
Oh,
Gabrielle.
yes. Sorry.
Someone
Here
just
we
mentioned
go.
that.
And if you want to practice with your own research question, maybe you have an assignment that you're working on now, feel free to try it out with your own question, and then you can use this time for any questions that come up, maybe if you're running into any roadblocks. But these two are also good, just practice for using the databases. All right, take a couple more minutes and then we will switch over to the Padlet to see what results everyone got. If you just joined the session, we're practicing searching for articles in the library databases. Okay, for the sake of time, we're gonna check the Padlet. I know that was really short, but we have a lot more great information to go over. So okay, it looks like a couple people are still typing. Oh, okay. Let's see. So one person used sleep quality and cognitive function and students, 19 results, and they were able to generate the citation. Okay, great. Um, okay. Awesome. It looks like, I don't know if you were able to sign in. Was that a link? Oh, okay. Oh, okay, great. So you're able to share your results. So you got 35 for the same question. So you can kind of see here how the different keywords play a part. Probably because this person included the college student aspect. And then I see Clement also shared his results in the chat. Let's see. Or he shared an article. Okay, so Clement was able to share an article in the chat that he got from his search. Thank you. Okay, so this is really interesting. We're getting a lot of different results for the same question. So this is a really good example of how keywords can really change the results you get. So keep in mind that the search process is you got to experiment. It is an iterative process. So if you do a search and you don't get great results, try again and you will probably yield different results every time with different keywords, different filters, so on and so forth. Okay, thank you all so much for participating. If there's no more questions for the library and research part, I am going to pass it on to Kate, who's going to talk about parts of a research article and effectively reading research.
Thanks so much, Gabrielle. Yeah, so we are going to do a deep dive into one of these peer-reviewed articles. We'll break down the various sections. So that includes the abstract, the introduction, methods and procedures, results, and discussion. And we'll see if we can tease out all of the important information. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, so this article is titled Direct and Indirect Effects of Adolescent Peer Victimization and Mental Health on Academic Achievement in Early Adulthood. So here, first we have the abstract, which is essentially a summary. It's going to include the research questions, past research, goals, methods, findings, and implications of those findings. And we really recommend that you read this entire section. It's normally just a paragraph or so to really get a sense of what the article is about. So here we'll go sentence by sentence and break down some of the terms. So using a three-way longitudinal design, we set out to map direct and indirect effects of adolescent peer victimization and mental health on academic achievement in early adulthood, and the buffering effect of positive family relations. So first we have a three-wave design. So this means that the data is collected at 3 points in time. Here we see it's at ages 14 and 4 months, 17 and 4 months, and 20 and 4 months. And it's a three-wave longitudinal design, which means that the individuals are followed over prolonged periods of time. In this case, it's 6 years. And then we have data was collected in Sweden from 2012 to 2018. So this is the location and the time period. And then the next sentence starts with "we found." So here we have the findings. We found concurrent but no longitudinal transactional effects between peer victimization and symptoms of depression, anxiety, and conduct disorder. So concurrent means happening at the same time, and transactional refers to mutual influence. So this means that peer victimization and depression, anxiety, conduct disorder symptoms, excuse me, influenced each other at the same time, but not over time. Now we have the next sentence. Peer victimization, depression, and CD had longitudinal direct effects on poor academic achievement in early adulthood. So this means that peer victimization, depression, and CD consistently negatively impacted academic achievement in early adulthood. Now the rest of the abstract, positive family relations did not moderate the effects. The results indicate that prevention and interventions against peer victimization and poor mental health may contribute to a higher proportion of individuals graduating from high school. So now we have keywords that are going to appear throughout the article, and we have the introduction. So the introduction is going to give us some background and context. It shows us why this research is important, what's at stake. It's going to include past studies and synthesize that literature to show us where the gaps are and what we still might need to find out. So here in the introduction, we learn about the importance of adolescence, that it involves these developmental changes that are going to impact adulthood. And one important marker of a successful transition to adulthood is high school graduation. The introduction is also where we get key definitions. So here, for example, peer victimization is defined. And again, we're seeing why this research is important. We learn how common peer victimization is. We see here 30% of children experience it. It has a really negative impact. And here also the researchers state that the long-term effects need further scrutiny. So that's why this study is particularly important. Later on in the paragraph, we have an example of a past study, a transactional model that was examined. But again, while the long-term effects of peer victimization and depression have been studied, none of these studies examine the effects into young adulthood, which is why this study in particular is significant. It's filling that void. It's filling that gap in the literature. here in the next paragraph, we're again identifying this gap in the literature. To our knowledge, the direct and indirect effects of adolescent peer victimization and mental health problems into early adulthood, and whether positive family relations moderate them, have not been examined. And now in the next sentence, we're getting a broader, more long-term goal. Mapping such association may in turn inform our understanding of adolescent development in general. So this study is important because it's going to help more broadly further our understanding of adolescence. So now we have the materials and methods section, where we'll get information on participants, procedures, methodology. Here we see that participants are adolescent males, 44%, so it's a pretty even split. We see how they were recruited. The measure section here, this is going to tell you how each variable was measured. So for example, peer victimization, one variable was measured using a questionnaire. Depressive symptoms were measured using the depression self-rating scale. And a scale is a good example of a qualitative measure. You'll see both qualitative and quantitative research methods. Qualitative methods include descriptive information. So any observations, any interviews, surveys are going to be qualitative, and most longitudinal studies are going to be qualitative. Quantitative methods use numerical data. So statistics, maybe a participant's height and weight. These are examples of quantitative data. Then we have the rest of the variables. We have symptoms of anxiety. They're measured using the Spence Children's Anxiety Scale. Symptoms of conduct disorder, positive family relations, and then we have two covariates listed. So a covariate is an independent variable that can influence the outcome of a trial, but it's not of direct interest to the researchers. And now we have analytic strategy. So this is the plan that outlines how the researchers are going to analyze their data. So this is methodology, and methodology is very complex. None of us here is a methodologist, but the analytic strategy is basically going to show the relationships between the variables and how they're measured. And if you want to do a deeper dive into methodology, you can always look into Chapter 3 of the APA manual. That explains methodology a little bit more. But we recommend that you go more to the discussion section, which is going to interpret the methods and give you some more significance. So here we have the results section. And this section is going to give you the findings, but without any kind of interpretation. So here, for example, peer victimization and symptoms and symptom levels were low at the group level. Higher levels of peer victimization were significantly correlated with higher levels of depression, anxiety, and CD concurrently and longitudinally. Here we have a figure with some descriptive statistics. We have some tables, and we're actually now going to jump to the discussion section here. So this is going to interpret and explain the findings. Excuse me. So here are some highlights. We see that some of the findings from this study corroborated other findings from other studies. But the findings from this study did contrast some other studies. And then we have the reasoning for some of these contrasting effects. Maybe it was due to the time span between assessments. And here we have the breakdown of the longitudinal effects on academic achievement. So peer victimization in early rather than later adolescence influenced academic achievement, and also what that suggests. So how are we going to analyze that? What is the meaning of that? We have a breakdown of the positive family relations. We learned that they did not buffer against the negative effects of peer victimization and poor mental health. And now we have the limitation section. And this is where the authors acknowledge that there are some limitations to their study. Here, sometimes we have strengths as well. For example, in this case, one strength is the large community-based sample. We have another example of a limitation, that they used a broad measure of academic achievement. And so they speculate that maybe a more fine-grained measure could have painted a more nuanced picture of these associations. And one common assignment that US students might have is the article critique. And that's where you have the opportunity to reflect on these different sections and apply your own critical eye. Maybe you would find some limitations that are not mentioned in an article. For example, are the theories clearly defined? Is there a logical flow to the ideas? Is the data displayed clearly? Do you think the sample was diverse enough? So these are things to think about when you're trying to evaluate an article, especially for an assignment like that, but even just more generally in your own research. And now finally, we have the implications and conclusion section, which is really crucial. This section is going to give you the broader meanings and significance of the findings, the impact of the results, any real-world applications, maybe policy implications, for example, or directions for future research, and why all of this is important. So for example, many factors influence this step of graduating from high school. So the interventions should be tailored to the individual, and specifically to the individual rather than the family system as a whole. So those are our major sections when we're looking at peer-reviewed articles. And I think we're gonna pass it on to Carlos, and then we'll take some questions at the end.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Kate, for breaking down the article. And, a lot of times the content can be quite complex, especially the methods section. So having a more, systematic approach to how to go about approaching the articles, especially when you're looking for multiple articles and you're doing that process of searching, it can get very tedious, right? So focusing on some primary sections is very important to not, overwhelm yourself by trying to read every single page, of these articles, especially the methods sections. But yeah, we'll shift a little bit to how we might apply and how we might integrate some of these sources into our text. And as Kate was mentioning, it really depends on the goals, right? What is the assignment in particular? It might be something like an article review where you're critiquing one single article. It might be multiple studies, or you might be asked to synthesize them, right, and to discuss them collectively, based on a particular topic, like in a literature review or something like a chapter 2 of a dissertation, right? So we have many different applications, but we'll just kind of focus on some of the, more standard processes and that relate to some of your particular assignments. One way to also help, and you noticed in that example that Kate was providing, there was highlighting of a lot of the text, and she was annotating. She was actually adding some text in there. So you do want to make sure that you download the files as like PDFs, and usually with like Adobe Reader, which is like a standard free software, you should be able to use like the highlighting tools or sticky notes or all kinds of annotations that you can directly make on the document itself. I mean, you're always also encouraged to print something out for those that want something physical and they can make, physical annotations. But digital copies, in those PDFs will work very well. But another way to kind of help visualize the structure of the studies is to use like something like this, like a table. There is a link here to a template, a fillable table. We'll be sure to share this PowerPoint presentation with everyone after we're done. But it has a fillable table like using MS Word. You can also just use the MS Word software to create a table of your own with as many, rows and columns. But this is another way to help visualize the article. It also helps to kind of with that comprehension, if we're seeing it in a different way, right? Some of us are visual learners. It can really help us to digest all of those parts to give us a more, comprehensive picture. Rather than just looking at the text itself. But here's an example of that Frick et al. Study. And so notice that there are different sections here in the table, and it just breaks down the different various parts. So the research questions that were involved, then some of the pieces of the methods, what type of sample they used, the instruments, maybe the research design, and then an overview of the major findings. And so you can, we do encourage you to use this process, especially when you're looking at connections across multiple studies. You can create a number of different rows, and each row would be a different source. And then that can really help you to identify some commonalities, some connections across multiple sources. And then you can ultimately uncover some themes that you're going to maybe talk about, for example, in a literature review. So you can do this in isolation for the breakdown of an individual source, but you can also combine it, with other sources to help establish some of those connections, some of those commonalities that you might see. So bringing it down in another way, there's a lot of tools out there as well, online tools like the XMind app, or we also have like a blank PowerPoint template that has some circles and web type of template view, so that you can do that on your own, and we can share that resource as well. But when we think about integrating these ideas into the body, we're going to do that in the form of text citations. And as everything is required to be an APA style, APA format. So we'll just look at a few examples of how we might do that. But we're essentially integrating sources, text citations, when we're summarizing ideas, when we're paraphrasing them, when we're quoting. And we want to make sure that we're including page numbers, for any directly quoted text that's in the paper. So a couple of examples of how we might weave in some ideas into the text, and we're doing this in the form of narrative citation and a parenthetical citation. So the narrative citation just means that we're using the authors as part of the sentence, and we're weaving that in directly to the sentence. So you notice Frick et al. We're using the abbreviation because there are 3 or more authors. So if you do have a source with 3 or more authors, you can use this et al. Abbreviation. And we're putting just the year there in parentheses, and then we might have some key verb. And then we have a brief statement, maybe an introductory statement that is introducing the article, in the text. So examine the direct and indirect effects of adolescent peer victimization and mental health on academic achievement. Then there's a little bit more about the findings, highlighting the need for early interventions to improve educational outcomes. Another option would be to have a statement, a paraphrase, and then you can just place everything. If you don't mention the authors as part of the sentence, you can put everything in parentheses in what's called a parenthetical citation, right? So we have another just brief summary statement about another article here, Yim et al., where this study explored the impact of negative achievement emotions on high school students' decisions to pursue education after high school, emphasizing the role of test anxiety and boredom in shaping their academic trajectory. So 2 similar studies here, but we're integrating these citations as we're discussing them. If you are focusing on one at a time, maybe it is an article review. It's not necessary to keep citing the same source every single sentence, right? At least I would say once per paragraph, typically when we're first introducing those ideas that are related to the source. So it really becomes relevant if we're changing paragraphs, or maybe we are changing sources. Then we want to make sure we're integrating those text citations consistently. Here's an example of just using some varied language. So You know, I think the key here is to try your best to vary the way in which you're introducing the sources. A lot of times students will use the repeated phrases. They'll use similar statements, which it can then get a little bit mechanical, but depending on if you're talking about, you know, a single source or maybe if it's multiple authors, you know, you can use these tags, these kind of sentence stems, which have some examples of different verbs. You might also refer to the study itself, or you might be referring to the study's findings. And so these are just great examples, you know, that you can use, you know, getting a thesaurus, having, you know, there's like powerthesaurus.org is a great website that will help to give some further examples of some different language that you can use. But like I mentioned, you know, I think just varying that structure is important. If we refer to subsequent mentions of the same source, we might use some tags here with some adverbs. And here are some other examples of some other verbs that we might use. And when we think about moving, you know, to how we might construct the paragraphs, we always like to highlight this meal construction. So the meal plan is just a simple acronym that can help to identify parts of the paragraph. We want to make sure that our paragraphs have a nice comprehensive topic sentence. And that main idea, that very first sentence of the paragraph, it's going to really outline all of those rest of the ideas that will follow. So a lot of students want to jump with the evidence right away. They might mention the source in that first sentence. And then maybe halfway through, they're mentioning a different source. So then we have some alignment issues there. You want to really make sure that you've established the context of the paragraph with a clear topic sentence. That's kind of a general overview, almost like a mini thesis in a way. And then we're coming with some examples as our evidence. So that will come in the form of these text citations. And you might be paraphrasing, you might be directly quoting some passages, but we're providing that evidence that is supporting that main idea. We also want to follow that up with some analysis. So some of our own interpretation that's describing that evidence, that's interpreting its meaning, giving that importance for the reader, and then a concluding statement. The statement might link back to that main idea. It's summarizing the key points in that paragraph. We also might add a slight transition to the next paragraph if we're building on similar ideas across multiple paragraphs. But just a solid pattern, a solid formula that you might find helpful when you're trying to put all of these ideas together in a paragraph text. There's some transitional words and phrases here. So I always like examples, you know, so we have a sheet here. It's a live link that will take to a resource that will break down, you know, some examples of different transitions that we can use. And it all depends on how we're connecting the ideas, right? Whether we're adding information, comparing, contrasting, you know, cause and effect, all different types. So here's just a quick example of that meal plan using that first example, the Yim, this is using Yim et al. But you can see a breakdown of the meal plan where we have that topic sentence here that really sets up the ideas on negative achievement emotions and how they can significantly impact students' motivation to pursue tertiary education or education after high school. And then we have some transitions that lead into the evidence. So we're bringing in the article and some information about that article. So notice there's a few multiple layers of evidence. We support it with some analysis in the orange there, maybe some multiple pieces of analysis using a transition in between, and then a link that brings the reader back to that main idea. So just an isolated example of how we might discuss one source. And then there's a couple of other slides here. I know we're running a little bit late on time, but this is another breakdown of an article, and then the meal plan showing a synthesis example of two sources. So here is where we might be layering multiple studies there. And so when we're layering multiple studies, it's really important that you have, you know, a general topic sentence that's really going to be able to integrate, you know, all ideas throughout the paragraph. So yeah, we have a few minutes left for any questions. I know it was quite a bit of information, but we did record it for you, so we'll be sure to share that with you all once it's complete. But any questions on the content, anything that came to anyone's mind while we were presenting that maybe we can answer before we close out today? No. Well, if there are no other questions, just want to thank you all for joining us and for hanging in there. I will put, I know Gabrielle put her writing support, I'm sorry, her email in there for library services, but I'll put our writing support email in here, and you can always reach out if you have any questions or like to set up a consultation. You know, we're happy to discuss any of your individual assignments with you. So thank you all for joining us today. You all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.